Welcome to Wisdom Within with Tina and Tanya. Today we have a really great episode for you. We are talking about something that a lot of women don't realize that they're allowed to feel, and that is grief for the past versions of ourselves, even the ones that we know weren't really us. So this is really about allowing ourselves to embrace who we are today, as well as honor and grieve that person from before. But before we jump into this, we want to introduce ourselves in case you are new to us or new to this channel. So I'm Tanya, and I work with women who are experiencing a spiritual shift. They feel like they're called towards something greater, but they struggle with self-doubt and second guessing themselves. And I guide them to really fully embrace that power and step into that next level. Tina, will you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Tina, and I guide women to deepen their spiritual connection through simple rituals, gratitude practices, and elemental wisdom. So we just weave simple, sacred spirituality into everyday lives.
Awesome. Thank you. And this space is really allowing ourselves to have an honest reflection. This is not about blame. It's not about shame. It's not about regret. It is just a new level of awareness for ourselves. So as we jump into this topic about, what it means to really grieve a version of you, Tina, do you have some ideas on what this looks like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I there's the young version of me, right? When I was in my Well, you've got your teens. Then I was a young mother. I was the young um, business person, trying to make my way in the business world and all of those different versions of us. It's like I always say my daughters grew up with two different mothers because one, my oldest daughter grew up with that um, young version who had no idea what was going on in the world and who um, was very unhealed and needed a lot of support. And um, she got the shit show basically, And then my younger daughter, she was born 9 years later, so she got a different version of me who is a little more healed, but still working on a lot of that. And so I think, we have all these different versions of ourselves. It's like you have the person who tried to please everyone, or the version that kept the peace, or kept quiet to keep the peace, or the version that wore those masks so well that she forgot that there was a mask.
Hmm. Oh, I feel that so much.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's important to really just honor those versions of ourselves and look at them because we've all grown so much in time. Time is going to create some sort of growth, some sort of shift and change, especially if you're listening to this channel, because that is the people that we call in, or those who choose to grow. Um, but it is we really can grieve that past version, and I have so many masks that I have worn over the years. And I think it's important to kind of differentiate a little bit. We're not necessarily talking about moods. I mean, sometimes I'm super high vibe, super sassy, super whatever, and then other times I'm very serious, very contemplative, very peaceful, very zen-like. And those are my moods, maybe my chapters, those things that I'm in, but those are both, I am both. Those are very much part of me. They're not necessarily masks. So these would be the times we pretended a little more so than the moods that we are in. I
Yeah.
feel. Does that
Yeah.
sound right to you as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's those times when we have done the thing. So, say, like for me, when I was younger, I was in a religion, and being in that religion, I was a certain way, right? I was living that life that they told me I should be living. And so sometimes we wear that, right? we try to be that person that they told us that we should be. And if we don't live that way, then, we're gonna die a
Going to
horrible
hell.
death and go to hell. But you know, so there's those types of things, or the version or the masks that we wear when we are in maybe a relationship. Then we see how um, we don't want to shake things up. We want to things to stay the same, and or we don't want to cause a ruckus. We don't want to mess up our relationship or whatever, and so we stay quiet and we allow ourselves to just hold on to any kind of emotion that we've had, or hold on to any kind of things that are going on within us. And I mean, I'm speaking to things that I have done so, many times in my life. I've been in those types of relationships. I've been in relationships with, I mean, even family, where I'm um, being a certain way because the family said that that's how you should be. So there's so many different things, masks or ways that we were, or versions of ourselves that we can look back on and see how we lived our life, or how we were.
Yeah, when I look back at the many masks I have worn over the years, the religious mask was very much loud and proud for me as well. I'm an all in, all out kind of girl.
Yeah.
And I don't half-ass things very often. And I was all in, and for a good decade at least. And I had a lot of friends, a lot of relationships, a lot of, I guess, certainty in, well, I would say it was feigned certainty, but it was the certainty that was taught, right? If you do ABC, then XYZ will be the result. And if you're not getting XYZ, then clearly you're doing something wrong. And so it was very like, okay, I can go back and do more. And I was very eager to please. I was very eager to solve the problem, to fix the thing. And I was really kind of in that space of, I don't care what it is, tell me what to do and I'll do it and I'll fix it.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that I do grieve about that girl because I mean, I miss parts of, there is that part of me that says if I would have just stayed in the box, if I would have just conformed, so many things I would not be experiencing now, especially in some of the struggles, right? But also I know that that was not meant for me. I knew 100% when I was exiting that whole life that I had previously that that was correct for me. But it is still a little, and I think that's important to know is that we do get to feel both, right? I get to, on one hand, pride myself in taking that step, in breaking that cycle, in doing all those things and doing it my way, and then also grieve that, you know, feeling of security, even if it was a false sense of security. I
Mhm.
remember how that felt. And I see that a lot in the clients that I work with as well, where they're, if I let go of the mask, I lose it all.
Yeah.
And I get that, family relationships are no longer there for me. There's a lot of things that went along with that decision. And so yeah, there's a lot of realness that comes with growth and
Yeah.
change.
Yeah, definitely. And just know that it doesn't just always show up like, crying or, all this angst and whatever. It can be confusion and restlessness, or sometimes it's guilt. And so there are a lot of different ways that this is going to show up when we start to look at those different aspects that maybe we are going to allow ourselves to grieve. And those feelings can show up, and they can show up in a different way than we think. I've been going through a little bit of some grieving myself right now, and have noticed that, while there is some crying here and there, most of it is that, there's a feeling of anxiety, there's a feeling of frustration, even for me, and a feeling of longing. What I wished I would have done this differently, or I wished I would have done that differently, or the, like I said, the guilt too. And part of that is part my human design too, right? Because with your being the human design person, that, with my human design, I guilt is one of the big ones in mine, and frustration is a big one that comes with that too. So that's kind of a shadow of what my human design is. But it can show up in all different ways. And so, um just so you know.
Absolutely. I think it's important to remember that, even if that version of you was not the correct you, even if it was wearing multiple masks, and and not just hats, but masks, like
Yes,
the
yeah.
ways in which we were pretending, um, she still carried you through. And
Hmm.
that's really something that's coming up for me a lot, lately, because I have recently started talking about my book again, and I wrote that in 2019, and I was so excited. And then I launched it and I lost it. I didn't, I had not thought that all the way through, and I panicked after it was out. I'm like, this is very typical of me, right? And we go through the motions and we do the thing, and then all of a sudden it's holy shit, it's out there, and now I'm
Yeah.
freaking out. And then, I release it, I have a launch party, and then COVID hits 2020. And I just completely stop even talking about it. It just took the wind out of my sails, as it did for everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And so I'm now just starting to talk about it again. And it's so interesting to me to look back at that version of me that wrote that book and recognize that I'm not there anymore, but also I miss that girl. There's
Hmm.
a part of her that was very brave. There was a part of her that knew exactly where she was going. And there is a part of me now that wants some of that again. And I have moments, right? It's in and out. But it is just like what you're saying. There's confusion, there's lack of clarity, there's a restlessness, there's an I gotta figure it out. Well, she didn't sit there and think I gotta figure it out. She just did it.
Hmm.
And without all of the things that I know. And so it's very fascinating to look at those versions. And like even what you were saying with human design, because we both have a fourth line. And that fourth line, really, their people are, I don't want to say everything, but kind of everything for
Hmm.
us. And it carries that wound of rejection, the fear of rejection. And that really describes so many of the masks I have worn, is because as long as I put this mask on, I'll be accepted, I'll be included, I'll be recognized for the things I know, I will be seen. But I was being seen in that mask.
Hmm.
I'm a projector, so recognition, being seen for your value, for your expertise is really part of my strategy. Is that recognition is huge. And I had it. I had it. And
Hmm.
yet it was not my truth. And
Hmm.
I had it because I was performing, and I could perform like nobody's business, and I could show up, I could preach it, I could speak it, I could agree. Uh, but then when you end that, you lose all of that. When you shift into that new version, and this old one goes away, the recognition goes away, the trust goes away, the rejection shows up. And so, yeah, being able to recognize that that was still a version of me that helped me get to where I am today allows us to grieve her and love her without clinging too tightly.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And, you know, these versions of our past selves, these versions of ourselves is what helped keep us safe. And it helped us to feel needed sometimes, right? Just exactly what you were saying. Helped us to feel needed, helped us to feel even maybe supported, because we were living that. Maybe we weren't true to ourselves, but we felt like we had the support of others because um, of the way that we were being, right? So there's so many ways that I mean, we can talk about this in so many different ways, is what I'm trying to say. And so, yeah.
So why is it so hard for us to let that version of us go? Why do we cling so to, because I see it in myself sometimes, and then I see it in family members, I see it in some of my clients where we hold so tightly to this past version of ourselves that we can't move forward. And I hear it a lot in the language people say when I'm stuck. Like stuckness is a very common phrase that we hear. I know I use that quite a bit, even as I'm talking with people about if you're feeling stuck. And a lot of times the stuckness, not always, but a lot of times the stuckness comes because I'm still trying to be this version of me.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts are with that, with why it's so hard to let her go?
Yeah, I see that so much in people too. It's like just holding on so tightly to that version of your past. And I mean, I've been there many times, but I think part of it is that we just can't. When we're letting go of her, we're admitting that she wasn't really you, right? So if we let go of that version of ourselves that was wearing the masks and we admit that she wasn't really us, that can cause some pain. That can be, very painful. Or, others, I was telling you before before we clicked record on this, was how my family still sees me as a whole different person than I am now. And so we have those expectations of others that sometimes hold us too. And, they still see that version of you that they don't want to look past. And so that creates that conflict. It's an inner conflict with us that, do I keep trying to show up as the authentic version of me or this version of me now that has grown, has learned, has, gained the wisdom, has done so many different things or whatever? Do I stay in that version that my family or the people around me have seen and still see, So that can cause a lot of conflict in our inner selves.
Hmm. Well, and I think it's the emotional attachment too. Those were survival strategies. Everything that we've talked about every time. I mean, when we look at the human development, we're meant to be part of a system, part of a family, part of a group. And we learn from birth on how to read the room in a way. Some people, I wonder if they actually ever learned that. Some may not,
Yeah,
but the majority
definitely.
of people can read the room. But there really is that attachment to survival. And so that's very much, I was in that periodically throughout different times where that was a mask I very much wore. And so when we take that mask off, but that is one of our survival mechanisms, then it's really hard to let that go. And so it's just recognizing that if that version was really there to keep you safe, that's a survival strategy, and we're not in that space anymore. And it's making those claims. We'll talk about those in a minute, but just being able to recognize that survival strategies are a thing. Um,
Yeah,
but we don't have to continue to carry those forward because we're not in that space anymore.
yeah, definitely. And I've looked at as we're talking about this, I keep thinking of all those different versions of myself, the people pleaser or the person who yeah, was working so hard at her job and felt like that was the way that she needed to be. That was how I showed my worth, right? Was through my work and through being that I was probably one of the most reliable persons in the business, in the company. And I mean, my boss will tell you, my ex-boss will tell you even now. I mean, he's like last year, he sent a message saying how reliable I was. I mean, it's like this has been years ago, and so that was kind of like the how I was, right? I was like, this was my where all my worth was in that position. And then there's the other one that, I used to run, and I miss that version of myself. I was running, I was healthy, I felt so good. I had um, I was running half marathons, and my kids couldn't even keep up with me. I mean, I was in my late 40s. I would think I was about 48 when I was running half marathons. And it was, I really miss that version of me because I was kind of that little spicy and a little fun and just, and then there's the version of me that was you know, in a abusive relationship who kept mouth shut all the time because I was scared I would get beat up if I didn't, and so I mean there's so many, and you can have compassion for those versions of you, and then you can have love, and you can have just sending yourself all of that, and just um, allowing them all to be there too, I think is a big thing. So
Mhm. Well, and you mentioned something that I think is really important too, and that is how our people in our life, in whatever version they're in our life, they still expect something of us in that version of that used to be.
hmm
So, I know that I have certain family members who very much think of me in a certain way, and they don't get it because in their mind, they're just waiting me to go back to normal, back to the way I was. It's just almost like this perception or this belief that they have created in their own mind that I'm just having a rebellious moment.
hmm
And I'm just doing these things, and that pretty soon I'm going to come back to normal. Like, when is she going to come back to normal? And I'm like, that was never my normal. I knew it was not my normal when I was a kid, and I followed the rules to please the people to have the thing. But there is really something to say when we still have people like that in our lives who are still expecting us to show up the way that we used to and longing for that. And that does create a little battle within, because it's almost as if every time we show up, we have to keep showing up in this new version. It's almost like we have to keep reinforcing where we are now. And there's almost a defensiveness because the slightest little slip back into that role, and they're like, oh, okay, all is well again, and it's like, no, that is not it. That's not, and so remembering that we're not responsible for the perceptions of others, and that we don't have to explain ourselves. We don't have to justify the version and the direction that we're going is also really helpful, because we will have times where people are just waiting for us to return to the people pleaser.
yeah.
It was so nice when you were the responsible one and the one that did everything. And there are times when I do still fall into that just out of habit. And then reminding myself, no, that's not where I am, um, is part of that process as well, I think, too. So it can create conflict, especially if it's within your immediate family. If our kids saw one version of us and they would really like that people pleasing mom back, and it's like, hell no, you don't get her. That can create some conflict in our partners too. And um, I know when Brandon and I first got together, he used to say that I was so hard to keep up with. And there is a part of me that misses that girl, but it was also not sustainable for me.
Hmm.
And I think he can keep up with me a little bit more now. So I don't think he hates it, but it's just very different, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there may be those people who will try to pull you back down into that whatever, so they see you that way and then they speak to it, or they will try and do everything in their power to keep you that way. And I've had that happen a lot too in my with immediate family for sure, where they still see me as a certain way, and then they drag me down. They try to drag me down and try to be like, especially when I'm doing anything that is the way I am now, the spiritual whatever I am, and they try to um, mock it. I think is what I'm trying to say. That's the word. Yeah, because I have had that where they're mocking me, and or telling me that I'm just causing problems, or those types of things. So we can have that conflict too with our immediate family, or friends, or whoever's, maybe people close to you.
hmm And I think one of the reasons that it can be hard to let go is there are bits and pieces of that are still part of our identity. You know, remembering that she brought us to where we are. You know, I think of myself. I mean, I am a motorcycle girl. I love 80s hairband rock, metal, all the things. I want my hair to be 80s hair. I can't quite get it there, but one of these days it's going to happen. But, you know, there's very much that rocker girl vibe in me, that rebel, Harley Davidson vibe very much lives within me. And that is an authentic side of me.
Hmm.
And I'm also very spiritual. I'm very in touch with my intuition. I trust my instincts. I love the stillness. There's something inside me that just craves less, that craves the candlelit room, that craves the cozy, you know, almost the opposite of the loud biker girl.
Hmm.
And both are still me. And so sometimes we get into that imbalance where we're maybe spending too much time as one or as the other, or either or rather than finding the blend. Um, but I think that's something that we also kind of recognize is this really a past version of ourselves, or is that still a part of us? The past version of me that was wearing the mask during, you know, a big chunk of my 30s had quite a exciting decade there. Was very much the rocker girl, but not all of it was authentic, but not all of it wasn't either.
Hmm.
And so the clarity comes with which parts weren't true to me, which parts were true to me. The music's true to me. The motorcycles are true to me. The enjoyment and excitement of experiencing life is true to me. But the bars every weekend or half the 6 days a week, we'll just be honest, every other week ish. You know, like that was not authentic to me. That was me trying, that was me fear of missing out. That was me being afraid that if I wasn't there, I'd be replaced. That was, so there are bits and pieces of me, but not that whole decade was a performance or a mask. So it's really about understanding which was and which was not, so that I know what pieces to carry forward into
Hmm.
who I am now.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a little bit about what it is about what's hard to let her go because we think we have to completely kill or release that entire identity. And it's like, no, actually, some of that is your truth. And not just the lessons that you learned there, but those bits and pieces of you that are true really do need it to come forward with you and get to be moving forward with you. And that is also authentic. So it's really giving yourself the space and time to kind of sift through that and realize, okay, that can go because that was me performing, but this is my truth and this gets to stay.
Yeah.
So I think that's helpful as well in that understanding why it's so hard to let her go because we think we got to cut the whole thing off.
Yeah. And that's true. But I think that the big the biggest part of it is you're not what you're saying here is you're not cutting that off and you're not moving on. You're integrating that into to your being, right? So you we hold it in a different way and we integrate that in to how we are now. So we still have, just like what you just got done, you just said, was how you have that biker girl, you have the spiritual gal, you have um the quiet solitude, and you're integrating all that into who you are now, right? And and I see that with myself too, is like, I have the cowgirl, um, that's all old country, but then I also have the, eclectic music, all these things, and then I have the art person and the spiritual person, and all of those are integrating into who I am now. And so um, yeah, you can start to look at it in that way, is how do I integrate these pieces of me instead of just moving on and letting her go.
Mhm. That's part of the becoming, right?
Yeah.
And part of the growth and stepping into is we know we're not that version of ourselves anymore. We don't know this new version of ourselves yet, but I know these pieces are coming with me because those are true.
Yep.
And so that's all part of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a little bit of how we can honor that past version of ourselves without holding her, without
Mm-hmm.
carrying her, without looking at her through a lens of victimhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, there were times in my life where um, I very much was a victim in reality ways. And I remember one time when a friend of mine who was a victim advocate at the time, and she called me a survivor. And I was like, no, 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 we're not. I'm like, we need a different term. And we came up
Mm-hmm.
with the best one, and we've never been able to remember it since.
Oh no.
So hopefully, maybe it will come to me again. But it was because I'm like, in order for me to be a survivor, I have to have been a victim, and I'm not identifying with that. That is not it. I had choices to make and all kinds of things. So there was a lot in there with it. But it's like if I take back and hold her, I almost treat it as if she was incapable. The
Mm-hmm.
holding of that past self of us is almost this, she's incapable of more. And yet clearly, she's not because look where I am today. So it's
Yeah.
allowing that integration, allowing that process to move forward, honoring versus, oh, you poor thing, let me hold you. No, that poor thing was so badass that she got you to where you are today. And so it's a subtle shift, but it's a very important shift too, I think, as we step into that becoming with who we are, is to, yeah, those things happened to us but this is us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense. And I totally agree with that because I've been in that same place where I've been the victim many, I shouldn't say many, but in several instances in my life, I've been the victim, right? And yeah, I don't like that term survivor either. And, because at some point, the other thing is at some point we take responsibility for our healing and for our letting go of um, those feelings and the things that are they're holding us back, right? So, um, and start to heal that and let that go. And yeah, so I love that. Um, Honoring her without holding her. I love that.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
I have done some incredibly beautiful practices, and especially as we're talking about practices that we can use to release her, to love her, and to release her. But one of the things that I actually did this in therapy, and I had the most beautiful experience. I could see the version of my, so we went through a specific scenario, something that had happened in my past. And she asked some of the most beautiful questions. So I could see that version of myself, everything that was going on, the turmoil, the trauma, the everything. And she was like, "What did you need in that moment?" And I remember sitting back and thinking, "Man, I don't know. I don't even know." And I realized in that moment that the truth of what I needed was I needed a hug.
Hmm.
I needed someone to just, it's going to be okay. Someone that was not going to say, well, here's what you need to do. Here's how you fix. I didn't need someone to come in with ideas and fix it. I didn't want someone or need someone to come in and tell me everything I had done wrong that got me into that place in the first place, right? But I just needed a hug.
Hmm.
And when I vocalized that to her, she's like, okay, who did you need a hug from? And I was like, for me today now, with who I
Hmm.
am now, looking back at that experience, because the only person who knows what you are going through and the way in which it affects you is you.
Hmm.
We want others to understand us and we want others to feel our pain and understand what we're going through, but they can't. It is incredibly impossible. We can love each other through it. We can care for each other and want to be there. We can't understand. There is no one on the planet that can give you that true love of, yeah, I know exactly everything you did, why you did it, how you got to this place, everything, and I still love you. And so to be able to give that to myself, so I actually did a visualization in that session where me now, at that time, a couple years ago, went to that girl from a few years before and just gave her a hug and said, it's okay.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. You're okay. And it was, you know, that gave me that permission to truly see myself through a lens and just give her that permission that it's okay to, this chapter is complete in that way.
I love that. I've done something similar to that too, but I think one of the things that has helped me too is journaling, and even just writing a letter to yourself, that past version of yourself. And I have done this in the past, is um, writing that letter to that version who, whichever version, you know. I did it for the version who was abused, and you know, apologizing, and what do you need from me, and what do I need to do, and those kinds of things, and just writing all of that out, and really was something that was really therapeutic for me. And just, letting it go, tearing it up and letting it go. The other thing I've done is, like, I've talked about art journaling, and just writing down those things in my art journal too, and then just covering it up with paint. And those are some really good ways to acknowledge that past version. And if we aren't integrating, then we're letting go of who she was and what she was doing. Those masks, that most of the time it's the ones we're letting go is the ones that were wearing the masks, right?
Hmm.
And so just letting them go, and
Hmm.
maybe even lighting a candle in her name. I love to do this for my kids. I light a candle every morning for um, our past trauma, and so um, that would be a good one too. Just light a little candle in
Hmm.
your past version's name.
Yes. I love candles.
Yeah,
I've
me
got
too.
candles all the time, everywhere. I've got them all over in here too, even though I'm afraid to light them most of the
Yeah.
time. down, but I do love that. And I even think this is really where we need to give ourselves permission. And it's not always permission. Sometimes it's making the decision. This is making the executive decision in your life,
Right.
right? I am the boss of my life. And really allowing ourselves to truly release those past versions of ourselves simply by looking at what's in our space. Because we have a collection of our life in our home. We have a collection of our life in our closet. I mean, just like we cling on to the clothes that are too small because we can't wait for someday to be able to fit into them again. I understand that position, but also when we realize everything that comes with that, we don't realize how heavy and how attached we are to those past versions of ourselves. Maybe for you, it was the runner. For me, I used to teach
Mhm.
fitness classes. So it's the same thing. But I'll tell you what, every time I still have and use the yoga pants that I've had forever ago, right? When I go in and I grab those yoga pants, I remember when I bought them, what was going on in my life. And it's not like I have a moment, but those memories haven't gone away. Our mind and the way we work, we attach to items. We remember things. I have this beautiful little purple selenite here that I will always forever know that that was the first Reiki class that you and I taught together was when we got those purple selenite sticks.
Mhm.
So we forget as humans how much of our energy, how much of our memories are tied up into objects and items, and those store energy and create clutter, and it makes it one more thing that we can release. Bless it and release it. Give it away, sell it, whatever you need to do, but allow yourself to clear those things. It's just like when we go through a breakup we delete all the pictures of that person.
Mhm.
We rip them out of scrapbooks if we have scrapbooks. We get rid of everything they've ever given us. Like we're creating I'm cutting you out of my life. Versus if we hold on to all of that stuff, then every time we see it, it creates emotion, it creates some inner chaos and turmoil, and it continues to hold that energetic connection with that individual. Same thing happens with those past versions of ourselves, where if we're holding on to those items from our past, that party bottle that I got at a certain time, all of that stuff, I gave myself
Mhm.
permission to throw all of that away because that is not who I was anymore.
Mhm.
Some of those things were absolutely beautiful, and I remember all the memories from them, and I let them go. So that
Mhm.
is the difference too, is that intentional release, clearing the shit out of your house, physical stuff in your physical space. A lot,
Mhm.
you and I talk a lot about energy on this because we're energy workers and we know how much we energetically hold on to those things. But if every place I look in my space is reminding me of that past version of myself, the things she went through, the experiences that she has, there's going to create that grief every single freaking day. And we can't hold all of that and still move forward in the way that we want with our healing and our new direction.
Mhm.
So, thinking of personal practices that we can use to release those past versions of ourselves, clear the shit, have a house clearing party, give stuff away, sell it, whatever, donate it, whatever it is that you need to do, burn it, but get rid of it.
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of burning a lot of it. Like I saw I don't know if it was an Instagram post or what it was, and one of my friends did a burning like that, just like in a big 5 gallon or 50 gallon trash barrel, and they um, took all of those things that because they were moving into a new chapter of their life, and they took all those things that reminded them of their old, what they had been doing previously, took those things and just put them in the fire.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, that's, but that is a perfect way of releasing everything. Just, it's kind of like just, and fire is transformation, right? It's the transforming of, you put that in the fire and it's gone, moves it into ash. So, yeah, I love that idea. And then, even cutting cords with that past version of yourself, which I've been meaning to do recently.
I've been doing that. I'm like, oh, that's one I love those. I
Yeah.
actually, yeah. Um, cord cutting is one of my favorite things to do in a variety of ways for that
Yeah.
very reason. But I do, and it's interesting because when I have conversations with individuals and even clients, when we talk about cord cutting, there, yes, but if you still have a house full of all the items that are going to
Yeah.
continue to bring that back into your life, then it's probably not going to be as
Right.
effective as you would like it to be. So it
Hmm.
is really, because, and the little things that we forget is that not only is it, we see that item that reminds us of that person that we dated and that it's cryptic, so nobody knows it's not a picture of him hanging in our house or whatever, but every time we see that, it also reinforces those belief systems around it that not worthy, not good enough, all the fights, all the trying, all the things like it just continues to carry that. So
Hmm.
yeah, the cord cutting is fabulous, but it's not all there is to do. Like it's
Hmm.
clearing those things and cutting the cord.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
it's like if you're cutting off an old person, an old partner in your life, but yet you're still talking to them on the phone or you're still messaging with them, then there's no freezer spell and no cord cutting that's going to take care of that for you.
Yeah.
It's that same thing with that past version of ourself. So it's really, if I'm going to continue now, yeah, maybe chat with her in the past if there's something you're trying to figure out. I love those types of things. But if there's that attachment to and that longing with, then it's time to just be able to cut that cord or to release her. I love the idea of writing a letter to that version of yourself, telling her all of the love and support that you have and
Hmm.
sharing all the gratitude for where you are now and how she helped you get there, and then releasing that version so that you can be clear and step more into. Otherwise, we end up tied, right? We're trying to move forward, but we're literally stuck.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
love it.
definitely.
And really, it's a gentle goodbye. This is
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be that. I mean, yeah, maybe burning all of our past shit seems a little uh, less than gentle, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's really, it is being gentle with yourself, allowing yourself to release it from a space of thank you, I no longer need you versus get the fuck out of my life.
Yeah.
Very, very different vibe.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so, again, when it comes with that honor of our past self is where we get the gentleness.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's about remembering who you've always been, right? It's not becoming somebody new because, that past version of ourselves, um, we're not just moving into a whole new version because we've integrated and we've released those masks and we've released those things. And it just helps us to remember who we've always been. It's that remembering. I've been working a lot with the remembering lately, and I love that word, how we um, bring that in. So,
Mm-hmm. I actually have a little freebie called the Remembering, so I'll add that down
oh,
below
yeah,
too because I'm like
that's
that
cool.
I'm like, hey.
Yeah.
But it is, and I love remembering who you've always been because we do and the work that you and I do, we talk a lot about our higher self and even do some guided visualizations in the works that we do with clients
Hmm.
with uh, getting advice from that higher self.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because as each layer that each version of ourself that completes, we step more closely to that higher self or
Hmm.
have the potential to if we choose to accept it.
Yeah.
Right. But it is becoming, like you said, it's not becoming someone new, it's becoming more of ourselves, but it's a step closer to that higher version. It's a
Hmm.
step closer to that one that has learned and integrated and embodied. And So I think that I love that so much because it is a remembering of who you've always been and taking you one step closer to that potential of who you are always going to become as well.
Yeah. And remembering that this is a sacred space, right? It's a place where we find that self-trust again. We find that clarity and that connection to that higher self, and helps it to grow in a way so we're not stuck in that. We're not staying in that same place, just moving out of the stuckness
Hmm.
and moving into that wisdom within that we talk about, and moving into creating that connection with ourselves and turning that into that higher, or allowing that to become that higher self connection. So,
Hmm. I love it. And remembering as well that it's okay to be in the messy middle.
oh,
That
yeah.
that in fact, the last two programs I've created came through when I was in the middle of the mess.
Uh-huh.
And it was a beautiful gift because I was like, oh, okay, here it is. And then I can create and at least the outline,
Mhm.
and then give it time to rest when I'm moving through that so that I'm not creating it from that space of
Right.
hot mess, shit show, pissed off, whatever that might be, right? But I mean, I don't necessarily want, and I actually told the universe this time, I'm like, okay, next program that I have come through, I don't want to be in the middle of, I don't need a mess to be able to get it here, but it is
Right.
really okay to be there and giving ourselves that grace of this is just the chapter that you're in. This isn't long term. It doesn't mean this is how it's always going to be. But this is where I am right now, is in the messy middle, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And that a lot of those beautiful insights and understandings and awarenesses can come in that space too.
Yeah, definitely. That's where we awaken, right? Usually is right in the middle of the mess, right in the middle of the shit show is
Yeah.
where a lot of that awakening comes from, where we start to see things in a different way, in a different light. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
and it is, that's part of the process. That's part of the moving, and being in movement is that messy middle.
Mhm.
So,
And I think it's important for people to remember too that a lot of times in the messy middle is where we start to numb out, where we
hmm,
start to disassociate, we disconnect from our bodies because we don't like the feeling of the messy middle. And
hmm,
yet because of that, we're missing a lot of the lessons. So if we keep staying stuck in the same loop or the same pattern, or we're in that space where we're saying, I've never gotten out of it, I've never experienced that. Well, if you're disconnecting from your mind, body, spirit when you're in the messy middle because you don't like the way that it feels and you don't like the discomfort of the shit, then that might be a pattern that's going to keep repeating because we've got to be able to embrace that messy middle because like what you said, that's where that awakening comes in.
hmm,
Those aha moments, those insights are coming through there.
yep,
So,
definitely.
and we kind of that's kind of a confusing thing because we're like, my life sucks and it sucks in this way. Of course I'm feeling it. Of course I'm in the messy middle. But sometimes that's just what's familiar.
Hmm.
So we're very comfortable in the part that sucks. And
Right.
so we don't necessarily recognize that we're not in the messy middle if that is part of our distraction, if that is part of our numbing, if because that can also be a way that we disassociate and numb is to just I hate it all. I hate it every, that type of a
Yeah.
thing. And so just to allow ourselves to really just be in it and not fight it and not try to swim upstream with it, just allow it to be there in the messy middle. This is the chapter that I'm in. I'm feeling all the feels. And then the awakening can come through to help us in
Right.
that next step,
Definitely.
which is not necessarily easy. I don't want to make it sound like it's a cakewalk, right? It's tough. That is the tough part, but that is
Yeah.
where the magic happens.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So, if there was like a grounding reflection, what is something that you would say for our listeners that they could ask themselves and reflect on a little?
So, what version of yourself Are you still carrying out of habit and not because she feels true?
Mm.
That's like I'm gonna have to write that one down and journal on that one a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes we get in that habit of carrying uh, those versions, and so yeah,
I was actually in that habit of a past version of myself, even just this morning as I was getting ready, almost that habit of rushing. And
hmm,
then I was like, no, I have all the time in the world. That's just a past version.
yeah,
I actually got up earlier on accident than I usually do. So I had more time, but it's so fascinating at how we really are creatures of habit. And so,
mhm,
um, what are we carrying? What actions are we taking? What are the things we're doing out of habit?
yep. Just because she feels true to you,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely.
Well, is there anything else you would like to include before we wrap up today?
No, I think I'm complete.
Awesome. So we do want to remind you that we have a Wisdom Within Toolkit to help you take these practices deeper. There's a variety of topics inside the toolkit. It is free. So we'll have a link to that in the description down below, as well as where you can find Tina and I online, where you can catch up with us there. We'd love to be able to interact with you a little bit. Drop us a message on Instagram or anything. We'd love to be able to connect with you online also in those
Yeah,
containers, I guess is what I'm trying to
yeah,
say. So, and as always, if you find this valuable, please like and subscribe. Please share it with others. Help us spread the word because word of mouth is really how our videos get out. So we
yeah,
appreciate you being here and for sharing with us.
yeah. Thank you so much.